if you're currently suffering from a DDoS attack or you want to prevent a DDoS attack in the future, which might disrupt your website, then this is the perfect place, because I've suffered two DDoS attacks in the past, ranging from 100 requests per second to 200 requests per second. And I came out through it in about 15 minutes of discovering it. So here are some of the tips that I used and will probably also help you. These are the tips that I would say will help against beginner to medium or even some of the advanced DDoS attacks. Some of the more advanced DDoS attacks are probably what you would be getting on Google, for example. That is not something I have more experience with, because even though it sounds kind of weird, but even Google actually gets DDoS attacked, or Cloudflare itself can get DDoS attacked. And on that point, the first thing you should be doing if you want to avoid a DDoS attack happening on a website is get Cloudflare on your website. So how you can do that is you can add your website to Cloudflare, and then in your DNS records, you can add your server to the A records and then add this proxied as an option. That way the attacker won't even know what IP address your server is running on. So they cannot attack it directly. They would have to go through Cloudflare every time. And then based on that, all the rules in Cloudflare you set up from now on will basically block them off. So what are the actual tactics to block them off now? So that was the very basic. Usually actually just putting a Cloudflare in front of your server. Cloudflare itself, I believe, has some rules by default where the most spammiest DDoS attacks or whatever get stopped without you even actually turning on anything. So that was the first thing, or I would consider that the zeroth thing. So the first thing is actually blocking off traffic from Russia and China. So the first thing is a WAF, which is a web application firewall, I believe. So here you can set up multiple things. So the first thing I would always set up is blocking bad countries. So usually what you'll find if you have some sort of logging system in your website, just filter out the most requests you're getting. Usually the DDoS attacks, you can kind of figure out which ones they are, because they'll be like 100 in 1 second or something like that. You'll find out that those are usually coming from Russia, China, or sometimes even some Asian countries. So I think Philippines, Indonesia, some of those, I would call them Southeast Asian countries, where the rule of law is kind of lax and they don't go after cybercrimes as much. Those ones are usually the originator, I guess, of DDoS traffic. So first thing I do is block off countries. Second one you can see here is I block off something called AS number, which is something that each cloud provider actually owns. So how you can actually get an IP address on a web server from a cloud provider is they have something called an AS number, which means they own all the IP address in a certain range. And each cloud provider actually has their own AS number. So, and all the requests that are coming out from them usually has, like, each request has an IP address that is coming from, and also an AS number, which is a kind of a more of a category of IP addresses, from what I understand at least. So what you should be blocking in AS number is, even though I really like them, Hessner, because I don't know why, but Hessner is just like too cost effective or something, because they're very cheap. So the bad actors really just set up like a $5 server, which would usually cost them like $20 on other cloud providers. And they also, Hessner also has a pretty generous bandwidth limitation. That's probably another reason. So I always block off Hessner, OVH, and Linode, because the big cloud providers actually, they have a very strict verification process, and they have their own way to detect if somebody has created a duplicate account. So usually it's too much of a hassle for an attacker to use the big tech cloud providers, let's say, as a platform for DDoSing use. The next actually step is a rate limit. So how rate limit works is, if you notice you're getting DDoSed on a specific page or a specific endpoint, you can just add that endpoint to only allow, let's say, 2 requests per 10 seconds by the same IP address. So you can do like some page. So whenever you have the URL that ends in /some page, and let's say you have 10 requests every 10 seconds, which would be 1 request a second, then you block them for 10 seconds. Pretty easy enough. And this way, your actual users will also not be impacted, because people are not gonna like click around, actual users are not gonna click around so many times and make so many requests. So this is probably the biggest help that reduces the number of requests that are coming from DDoS attacks, at least in my case, where I was getting 100 or 200 requests per second. Now another one is you can also add in the custom rules, block people based on their threat score here. So a good number, I believe it's greater than 30 is usually when it's like pure spam. But even then you probably have a JS challenge or managed challenged. So those are some of the tips to reduce DDoS attacks on your site. So if you're actively getting DDoS attacked right now, I would urge you to sign up for Cloudflare, put your website on there, and then just get it done. And usually you will notice a pretty quick improvement. And after a certain amount of time, the attacker usually just gives up, because it is actually also costing them whenever they're DDoSing you. So for them, it's more of a block your site at the peak traffic time when your actual customers would be using it, and then just kind of go off. If it's a competitor, they can be doing it for a long time. But usually if it's just some script kiddie who wants to prove that they have something to prove, they will just do it for an hour or so, and then they will kind of hop off. So those are some of the tips. Let me know if you have any other. Oh yeah, and also one last thing. If you're noticing a lot of fake signups, this is something I do. I would urge you to only allow Google OAuth. That is like sign in with Google, those sign up buttons you see. Because then you're kind of passing off the responsibility of handling signups to Google. And that way you can avoid having to code a bunch of stuff or manage the DDoS attacks or everything yourself. Because Google is probably much better than you are, because they deal with stuff like this all the time. And one final thing, if you're hosting a SaaS or any business, I hope you have some sort of uptime monitor. So what an uptime monitor does is it will just ping your website every 3 or 5 seconds. And if it notices it's offline, then it will send you an email. This has helped a lot whenever my site would just go offline for no reason, or some DDoS attack actually happens on my site, or some error is happening. And usually this is one of the ways you can find out that your website is actually suffering a DDoS attack, because you're not going to be on your website constantly just like clicking refresh and then checking if your website is loading in time or not. And yeah, that is it. If you want to help out the channel, click on subscribe. I don't know, but leave a comment down below or something. And yeah, see you in the next one. Bye.